Okay, we're now moving on to our next session, and just to let everyone know that up until 3:30 the two stages are still running, then we go to one stage. But right now I'd like to bring Tim Norris-Wiles, Managing Director International of Habu, up to the stage. This is our brand's Poised for a Clean Data Revolution. Please welcome Tim.
Thanks. Right, now, am I on? Can you hear me? Hope so. Just like Omar, I need to put these on because I'm blind when I get like long distance. So there you are. Brilliant. So I think what a great morning to start with, right? I think it's been great to see so many themes around sustainability, diversity, inclusion. That's really got me lit up, actually. Thank you to MediaTel for putting on a really amazing event as well. As always, I always enjoy these. I'm very sorry that you've got me now in your mid-afternoon lull, but I'll try and kind of make up for that with hopefully something interesting. And I want to talk about something that I think is quite an important topic, and it's the role of privacy in all of this, right? And we know that data is a big part of marketing and advertising nowadays. But a lot of the ways we've worked with data, a lot of the things we've done and taken for granted, I think, are changing. And we're going to talk now about what we call this kind of clean data revolution, this idea that privacy is going to be front and center of what we do with data and how we interact with consumers. Before I do that, let me introduce myself just quickly. So I am Tim, Managing Director of a company called Habu. Habu is a really privacy-focused ad technology company. This feels a bit like a therapy session for me because prior to this, I worked for a company that wasn't quite so focused on privacy. We built one of the biggest DMPs, kind of 4.5 billion profiles in it, hugely centralized, I think very much not the zeitgeist today, but we move with the times, right? So I've had about 15 years in ad tech, martech, all on the vendor side pretty much. I think I'm fairly well qualified to understand some of the things that are happening in this space. On a kind of more fun fact about me thing, I once drove a really crap car from London to Mongolia. So I bought a Fiat Panda off a lady in Bow in East London for 150 quid, and it made it the whole way without breaking down once. That's a little counterpoint to what people say about Fiats being unreliable. But given we're talking about sustainability, you'll be pleased to know that I actually cycled here today. So those days are gone. I have got some green credentials. So probably 100 people will have stood on stages similar to this over the last few years and told you that data is the new oil. And in some ways, that's a really great analogy, right? Because there are a lot of synergies, I think, a lot of parallels you can draw between the way that oil is extracted, kind of like distributed, refined, as we can think of what we've done with data and consumer data over the last years. But if we kind of wind the clock forward to today, we should probably not want to ever use this analogy ever again, right? Oil obviously is conceived as dirty and destructive, unsustainable, and a lot of what we're talking about today is really responsibility and moving into a new era for advertising. And data's not excluded from this. We talk about ad net zero and the things about the actual physical emissions, but there are also digital emissions that come from the way that we treat and work with data and the way we work with consumers. Does anybody have any idea what this visualization might be, or have you ever seen it before? It has a name. Probably not. They're called climate stripes. I think it's a really nice visualization because what you get in this visualization, you've got these 5 bars, each one is a continent, and then you have these tiny little columns here that are color-coded, and each one of those columns is a year, and the color represents the year-over-year change in temperature. So essentially what we have in one slide, one graphic, is a snapshot of climate change across the world happening. Things are getting hotter, and I think that's happening in data as well. We've all seen this, right? Regulation, we're seeing consumer sentiment, we're seeing massive pushback against the use of data, and we're reaching our own boiling point. And as we think about the vendor sphere and the tools we need to use and the ways in which we engage with our customers using data, it's really important that we acknowledge that sentiment because it's making it out into the mass market. I'm a huge fan of John Oliver. Right? He's my favourite Brit abroad, I'd say. So he does his show Last Week Tonight on HBO. And this is a direct screenshot of his show from 2 weeks ago. He did a 20-minute expose on data brokers. And he went super deep. And I should add, I'm not calling out these specific companies. This is John who did that, not me. I'm sure they're improving their ways and whatnot. But the thing that he's really touching on here is that consumers are sick of the idea of mass surveillance. Surveillance advertising is something that's now coming up in the courts in America. Huge pushback on it. Centralization of data and power, risk, privacy leaks, all this kind of stuff. Just a massive amount of negative consumer sentiment across lots of vectors. But the thing is, what we're actually kind of like falling into as a bit of a trap, I would argue, is this idea of kind of, well, if data's bad then, it must be bad. We should probably get rid of all the data, right? No more data. But that's like saying we don't need energy anymore, right? Data itself is not actually the problem. The thing that's the problem is the way that we've been approaching this. It's those analogies like data being oil. It's our approach to kind of unsustainably harvesting and creating experiences using data that weren't respectful. So to that point, there are alternatives to oil, right? We don't have to drive a petrol car anymore. And so I would encourage everybody to start thinking of data as energy, right? Data is the energy that we need in some cases to power the brilliant brand experiences that we're all building or that we're all interacting with, whether it's personalization or whether it's recommendations. All those things are fueled by energy. And I guess if you take nothing else away from this presentation, I guess it's that I would put it to you that we are leaving the fossil fuel era of data at the moment. We've been in that. We've had 10 years of building these behemoths of really unrespectful systems and very opaque and non-transparent systems that would take consumer data and kind of spit results out the other side. And we're entering an era where data is actually going to be a really sustainable, really transparent, really direct opportunity. And it's going to be something that's going to be way more durable if we embrace this. And that's what brands need to, I think, really start to investigate and get their heads around. So no presentation about data is complete without a slide that goes up and to the right and talks about how much data there will be. But it's interesting because this is almost paradoxical. And that goes back to the point, data's not going away, but the stakes are getting higher. We're producing more of it. It's going to become harder to actually leverage it. So when we have 175 zettabytes of data, whatever that is, I don't know how to quantify it, if I'm honest with you, in 2025, the key thing will be how we can actually harness the energy that lives inside this data sphere in a responsible way. Right? I think earlier Ollie was talking about that circle of kind of objectives that Heineken has. And you notice that if they do the right thing, the consumer becomes more comfortable with providing more data to Heineken, which is fantastic, right? So long as they can trust them. That's the key thing there. And it will be a massive competitive advantage. But underneath all of that growth, what's actually happening is that data is becoming sovereign. It's becoming massively decentralized. If I'm a company like Roku are here, and I'm building this amazing data set around ad exposure and consumers and all of my kind of consumption graph there. It's going to live inside Roku. It's not going to be able to be, merged and centralized with anybody else's data, nor should it be. And the same will be true for brands, right? The same will be true for cloud companies. And we're seeing this actually with the walled gardens, right? They put the walls further up a few years ago. They said, too risky. If you want to come and get data from me, it's going to stay inside my four walls, and we have to find another way of working with this. So that's a truth that we're just going to have to adapt to. Decentralization of data, sovereignty of data, and that's your data, but also consumer data. And if we can do that, there's some amazing opportunities. I actually think like this new era, moving out of the fossil fuel era and into the clean data revolution, brings incredible opportunity for brands and vendors, right? And agencies, everybody kind of in the ecosystem. We can actually build a privacy-first ecosystem and still get the things done that we've been doing for the last 10 years, but we can do so without using the customer, the consumer, as our product. There's actually a really big opportunity, which I'll come on to in a second, to actually build direct partnerships. Second-party data has been long lauded, but not really much achieved. But if we can actually start to bring data partnerships into broad daylight, consumers are okay with that, I would put it to you. They just don't like the grey middle. That's the thing. And finally, to actually start operationalizing things like data science, machine learning, because if we can't rely on one-to-one matching for everything anymore, then we're going to have to find smart ways to start to expand on what we do have. We had Kantar up here earlier. I'm sure Kantar would love to profile every single person in the world and get their perspective. It's not possible, right? So how do we expand on some of those truths that they do unearth? Huge opportunity. To put it into context and kind of go deeper into this oil analogy, if you will, right? Look at what happened with cars. So on the left-hand side, you've got the 10 biggest OEMs before Tesla came along, right? Who were all focused on internal combustion, all had their kind of business as usual. And you got Tesla. Tesla, as recently as October 2021, had $1 trillion market capitalization versus the other guys. They had the same capitalization as all 10 of them combined. And that's despite shipping 2% of the vehicles. First mover advantage in terms of capitalizing on something that people are interested in that's new, right, is incredibly powerful. And what we're seeing is that technology, as always, I'm a vendor guy, right, as I said, so I tend to be ahead of these things, sometimes painfully early in these new technologies, that clean rooms, a concept called a data clean room, is emerging as something that people are now investing in. So Google back in 2017 said, if I can't give you my measurement data anymore, I can't give you the log files and all the IDs, I'll find another way. And what they did was they built a system called a data clean room that allowed people to come to that data and leverage things like cryptography and differential privacy and new stuff that's always being invented to be able to run controlled queries on that data and get aggregate insights out. And that started a bit of a trend. We've seen Amazon launch one. We've seen Facebook launch one in competition. But now what's happening is companies like Pepsi, like L'Oreal, like Electronic Arts, broadcasters like Roku, NBC, they're all saying, well, I'm going to do a clean room. And really, the technology, the name, it doesn't really matter. What's happening is people are saying we still need data. We still need to be able to interface with people outside of our four walls. But we need to use the right tools for the era. And we need to be able to do this in a way that allows us to not compromise consumer trust. So this is becoming a mega trend, thankfully. I think I might have picked a good category for once. And what we're seeing is that it's only going to continue. So how does it really work? Well, you can think of clean rooms really as a kind of fit-for-purpose place in which people can bring two or more data sets together without ever moving them, without ever exposing them. Right? So that's the key thing. If you don't have to move it, if you don't have to copy it somewhere, we remove one of the first barriers that exist in all of this, which is trust and control. If I needed to do conversion optimization, frequency to conversion, let's say, with a CTV provider, I might have to give them my conversion data, or they might have to give me their campaign analytics in order for me to merge them. But in the new world order, what we'll be able to do is actually leave them where they already were and use differential privacy to be able to combine them, get the insights, get the measurement, but to do so in a decentralized way. And that's what people are getting so excited about. We actually work with Disney, and Disney's building a whole ecosystem around Disney Select, where they can let brands and agency holding companies come in and have incredibly granular kind of permission queries they can run that get them the answers they need without ever having to move or expose any of the data. So they get their closed loop measurement, but they don't have to worry about things like the GDPR, worry about, kind of privacy, which is amazing. And this is the point, right? Is that when we actually start to think about it through a consumer lens, a lot of the things we've been trying to do around joining data, around kind of second-party data, third-party data, they haven't really been nefarious in their attempts. It's just we didn't have the right levels of control, didn't have the right levels of kind of usage control, privacy preservation in there at the start. But if we do have those things, then we can say, well, it doesn't need to be the brokers anymore. It can actually be that we go direct. And I'll put it to you that consumers don't really have a problem with the idea of, say, McDonald's and Delivery Hero in Germany partnering to give a better customer experience, for example. Or L'Oreal working with Amazon because they spend hundreds of millions of dollars in the Amazon estate, and they want to do really granular insights and analytics around their D2C data versus the people who live on Amazon. And I actually think that what's going to happen is we'll see a new era with privacy at the front where we actually get way more interesting, way more impactful, and way more compliant opportunities to bring data together without any of those challenges that came before. So I'm conscious it's not really a workshop, so I won't go too deep on this, but what are the outputs of this type of technology that brands should be thinking about? So, really obviously, it's the campaign life cycle, right? So if I have a clean room infrastructure in place and I can start to connect things like publisher data or even campaign data, right, my conversion information, I'm going to begin with planning and insights. So the ability to actually take seeds that I might have or audiences I'm interested in, get those out into the ecosystem to map them against the world and improve my planning and insights. And from that, what we're seeing is this concept of kind of private segmentation and private activation. So this is very much kind of like bringing two discrete data sets together or target audiences together, combining them. No one else can do this. It's a completely unique combo, and being able to activate it in a way that is private from end to end, right, without any leakage of IDs into bid streams or any of that bad stuff that came before. And then the killer bit is that we can actually measure. Because if I can then provision my conversion data post-campaign without exposing it or handing it over, I can start to see what the impact was. And now, whilst this stuff's new, we're working with brands who are doing this end-to-end now. And amazingly, some of them are CPGs. They don't have any data, right? They're just saying, this framework gets me the ability to test and learn in a privacy-first ecosystem to start doing this stuff. So to that end, can't name the CPG, unfortunately. They won't let us. But we are actually seeing that we can sustain the same level of use case realization as was coming before when people had access to billions of profiles in third-party data exchanges. But we can go direct to retailers, for example. So I could take CRM data and combine it with a retailer's shopper data and be able to actually do things like analyze baskets, work on my attribution, understand purchase frequency for my particular product or category, which is really, really useful, right, if you're in a hyper-competitive market, and especially given the pressure that a lot of these CPGs are under right now from the likes of Amazon. We're also seeing, though, with these walled gardens, we can start to unlock some of the insights and the data that are in there that were really hard to get to before. I mentioned that Amazon had a clean room. Being able to delve into that set of data, it's everything from impression to campaign to purchase, kind of sponsored brand product. This is really amazing stuff. And if you're spending lots of money on Amazon, you need to be investigating these existing kind of walled garden clean rooms now, I would argue. But finally, there's this concept of being able to almost build this perfect panel, if you will. You're never going to get everybody anymore. That's the first thing. We're not going to go out and get every profile in the world. But saying I can tie my exposure data, whether that's from my DSP or whether it's from a specific media partner I work with as my top of funnel, and then going out and sourcing really custom data arrangements, right, one-to-one arrangements. We did some work with a big auto OEM who was able to take the trade desk kind of raw exposure data at the top of the funnel, and typically they have months between, something happening in a DSP and an actual outcome on the forecourt. Very hard to tie together in auto. But going out to an endemic kind of auto-classified site and being able to fill the middle of the funnel with direct signal around people who are actually looking at and querying about cars gives them the line of sight they need. And it's only them who does it because it's a unique partnership. So lots of cool things that we can do. So you're probably thinking, how can I kind of do something in this area? What should I be thinking out for? So the overarching term for this type of technology that's emerging is called PETs, privacy-enhancing technologies. So investigating PETs is something that most people should probably be doing right now if you're interested in data-driven marketing, because that's the stuff that's going to be the overarching category that fuels a lot of these compliance solutions going forward. Clean rooms is an example of a PET, effectively, and there's lots of other stuff happening. The other one is pretty obvious, right? If you haven't done this, we're in trouble. Assessing your data flows, right, and the transfers you have in place today, the systems you're working with, especially if they're using personal data or especially if they're using things like pseudonymous IDs. There's going to be a bit of a bloodbath on the client side. We're going to see that go massively kind of like contextual and heuristic. Data doesn't disappear. It actually goes into more of a kind of back-end data warehouse level, and we need to be very smart about the way that we do those things. And that's where clean rooms will come in. Small call to action. If you actually go to habu.com, there's a banner at the top, and we've got a survey we're running. And this is the State of Data Collaboration Survey. It's the first one we've ever done. But what we're trying to do is kind of get a gut check from people as to how advanced they are in this space, whether they've worked with a clean room, whether they're working with Amazon's one, for example. And if you do that, I'll be sure to send you a copy of the report, which will have tons of insights. We've already got a couple of hundred respondents. And then the last thing I'd encourage people to do is to engage with the IAB Tech Lab. So on my point around PETs being a big thing, the newest working group within the IAB Tech Lab is the Privacy Enhancing Technologies Group. Very active, lots of different stakeholders across technology, agencies, brands, and you can get involved by joining that and help us to build a more privacy-compliant future. Thank you.